Hello and welcome to Limited Insight. Here is a brand new channel brought to you by the Humble Checkmate, better known as Hunter. We are just starting this channel up. It's going to be a few different people rotating in and out, but basically just to kind of give you some information about the limited scene of Magic currently as it is. We are starting here on our very first video with a Bloomburrow strategy guide. Bloomburrow is the newest set being released by Magic the Gathering, and this is a very interesting set. This is the first set, well, maybe not the first set, but it's the first set in a while where we're seeing typal synergies throughout all of the archetypes in each of the color pairs. We've had for a while now where one or two archetypes will be typal or tribal, as some people call them. We saw that in Ixalan, the most recent Ixalan set with the dinosaurs. We've seen it with detectives and MKM. So this set is going to be very interesting. And also, as you can see from this picture and as we go through this art, we're going to see a lot of woodland creatures. This is a plane of Magic that's set in kind of a foresty vibe. The world is called the Valley. And so whenever people travel here from outside of the valley, then they actually take on an animal characteristics. And so whenever we see some planeswalkers here, we're going to see them as, well, furry animals. So this set's going to be awesome. I'm very excited for it. The limited atmosphere looks very interesting. So let's get started. So I want to start out with just what we're looking at. So Bloomburrow, we've had play boosters for a few sets now, but I thought maybe let's just talk about them for a second. Play boosters have replaced draft boosters and set boosters, and they kind of the goal is to be the best of both worlds. So you're gonna have 6 to 7 commons in every pack, three uncommons, one card of any rarity, wild card. They call it booster fun. Then you have one rare or mythic rare. So it's kind of the same as draft boosters where you have one guaranteed rare. And then one traditional foil card of any rarity, most likely going to be a common, but obviously can be a rare or mythic. And then one full art seasonal basic land. This is something I love from Wizards. We're throwing out the basic lands, and we're only putting in full arts. I think that's a win, and hopefully they continue that throughout the next sets. Starting here, we're going to look at the basic mechanics you can find in Bloomburrow. So I'm going to go through the new mechanics and then the old mechanics because some are returning. First up, we have classes. So this is brand new. We've seen things like this recently. These are basically specialized enchantments that work in a particular way. And actually, as I say this, class has been in Magic before with the D&D sets. But let's just say they're brand new because a lot of people aren't actually used to them. So basically what a class is an enchantment that when you play it, you're going to gain that first level. So looking at Builder's Talent, when Builder's Talent enters, you get a 0/4 white wall creature token with Defender. When you play Gossip's Talent, you gain this ability that whenever a creature you control enters, you surveil one. So each of these enchantments enters in with an ability, but you can level it up. And so if you see right there, the Oracle text, gain the next level as a sorcery to add its ability. So these are only at sorcery speed. You cannot upgrade these at instant speed on someone else's turn. But basically you pay the mana. So for Builder's Talent, that level 2 cost is 1 white, and then you'll gain that new ability. And I think all of the classes in Bloomburrow have 3 levels, and there's a rare and an uncommon for each color. So these aren't really a mechanic in and of themselves. They actually serve to pay off and to enable other mechanics, really. So we're going to see how those play into other things later. Next one we have, this is brand new, is Expend. And pretty much what Expend is, it's whenever you spend a certain amount of mana in a turn, that's when you trigger this Expend. So the Raccoon Berserker Bark Knuckle Boxer says whenever you expend 4, he becomes indestructible. And then every time you have spent 4 mana, he will become indestructible in a turn. And you don't have to spend all the mana at once. It can accumulate. And so let's just say you play a 2 mana card during your first main phase. Then you go to combat, attack with a Bark Knuckle Boxer. If you have a 2 mana instant, then he'll become indestructible during that during that instant speed, along with whatever the instant does itself, right? And so expend 4, a little... I think this one's going to be a little tricky sometimes because a lot of the cards in the set are cheaper. But if you can build a deck around it, it can definitely pay you off well. This is going to be the raccoon mechanic, as you can see, based off what creatures we have here. So moving along, we have forage. Forage is what the squirrels do. And forage basically relates to food tokens. So in order to forage something, there's going to be cards that say, as an additional cost, forage, or forage to do this thing, right? Forage, what it means is, look at your graveyard. If you have 3 cards, you can exile them, and that's you foraging. So if you get rid of 3 cards in your graveyard, you forage. Or you have the option to sacrifice a food. And so the squirrels are all about getting food tokens so they can forage, so they can gain some benefits. Whereas the other decks, some especially these black cards, some other decks might want to play these cards and just exile from the graveyard rather than, because they won't have the food tokens. But basically, let's just look at Curious Forager here. When he enters the battlefield, you may forage. So a lot of these abilities are going to be mays. When you do, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So once again, you're getting a benefit if you do that forage. Whereas you could just play this out as a 3-mana 3/2 or 3-mana 3/2, sacrifice a food, bring a card back from your graveyard. And so there's a lot of different forage cards. They all do different things. But that's just a basic overview. Into gifts. Gifts are very interesting. I think gifts are super flavorful. They add a lot to the hardiness of this set. So basically what a gift is exactly as it sounds. You're going to give a gift to your opponent. And so if you look at Dewdrop Cure, a 3-mana white sorcery, you can gift a card. And so you can promise an opponent a gift as a cast a spell. And no, that doesn't mean you can promise them and then break your promise, okay? Promises have to be kept here in Bloomburrow. If you do, they draw a card before its other effects. So basically you declare whether or not you're going to give them this gift. And a lot of times it's a card. We'll see a Tapped Fish. Longstock Brawl has the Tapped Fish gift. Those are the 2 most common ones. There's a few others. Not that many, though. And then whenever you cast this spell, after you make your decision, they will either gain the gift or not gain the gift based off whether or not you give it to them. And then it's going to change whatever the text of the card is. So look at Coiling Rebirth. I love this card. The art on that one is just beautiful. Return a target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So 5 mana, you get to do that no matter what. Then, if the gift was promised and that creature isn't legendary, you can create a token that's a copy of it, but it's a 1/1. That's going to relate to our next mechanic in the set. So basically, it's giving your opponent something so that you gain a little something extra. That's what gift is. And as we see with the Coiling Rebirth, this is kind of a setup for Offspring. This is by far my favorite new mechanic. I think this one is a home run. It's beautiful, and I just realized I didn't put any of the baby tokens in. That's the best part of this whole thing. But you can go look those up and discover them yourself. So, what is Offspring? Offspring is play this creature, pay an extra cost. And so on all 3 of these creatures, you'll see Offspring 2, Offspring 1, Offspring 1 in a blue. Basically, the creature you can just play straight up for its cost, or you can pay it for its cost plus its Offspring cost. And what Offspring does is whenever you pay that cost, so for Splash Lasher, if you pay the 4 mana plus the 2 in a blue, you're going to get a copy of that creature token. That's a 1/1. They are exactly the same. The token even has a mana value. It's specified on the card. And so they're exactly the same. It's just one's a token and you get the other one, and the one is smaller. And usually these are going to give you a compounding effect. So with Intrepid Rabbit, you could play it as a 3-mana 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, it gives +1/+1 to something. Or you could play it as a 4-mana 3/2 and a 1/1 that give +1/+1 to 2 different creatures to the same creature. You can kind of work it how it works in the moment, right? All of these Offspring cards I think are just dope, beyond the limits of dope, and especially the tokens. I'm really angry that I didn't put one in, but they're all just like little baby versions of the grown-up cards. So Offspring, I think, is an awesome mechanic, and we'll see how it plays out. I think Offspring is mostly a rabbit card or a rabbit mechanic, but it's featured in all the colors and in all the decks. So it's going to be a really awesome mechanic in my opinion. So I think, no, we got one more new mechanic, but really this is an old mechanic. It's just been fixed. If you know Heroic from the past, this is now Valiant. And basically the change is it only triggers once per turn. But what it says is whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability. And what it means is whenever you target this creature with your own stuff, then it gains a benefit. So for Whisker Quill Scribe, whenever it becomes a target of a spell or ability, for the first time each turn, you may discard a card, and if you do, you draw a card, right? So it's giving you a little extra benefit, and this is the mouse mechanic. There's actually not a single card that's not a mouse that has Valiant on it, but all of these relate to the mice kind of buffing each other up. And so there's mice that target other mice, and there's mice that when they are targeted, they get a benefit, they gain double strike, or they gain some other thing. But this is how the mice fight. The mice all pump each other up when they're together. And so that's what we're going to see from Valiant, and that's what we're going to see from actually the white and red combat tricks as we look at that in the later. So these are some returning mechanics. I just put these in for people who are newer. Prowess doesn't always explain it on some of the cards, but basically what Prowess is if you look at Kitsa, this middle card, Prowess, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So especially with these otters, this blue-red mechanic, they're going to be casting a lot of non-creature spells, and a lot of the different color combos use non-creature spells a lot, and so Prowess is just going to give them a buff during that turn. And this works at instant speed as well. So you have to remember that as you're playing against these blue-red tricky kind of decks, they're going to be gaining this benefit. The next thing we see is Threshold. And this is for the rats. They want things in your graveyard because they get better as they have stuff in your graveyard. What Threshold means is, are there 7 cards in your graveyard? Right? That's all it is. Count them up. Lay it aside. If you have 7 cards, then boom, you're good. So if you look at this, the Shoreline Looter here, I actually really like this card. 2 mana, 1/1, can't be blocked. But if you have 7 cards in your graveyard, every time he deals combat damage, you're going to draw a card. So it's a very, I think that's a good payoff for Threshold. It's going to be very interesting to see how Threshold pays out this set. But yeah, that's all Threshold is. So you get a benefit as long as you have 7 cards in your graveyard. Specifically, it has to be 7. Doesn't matter what type. We saw in Ixalan where it descend and how many cards have you descended. It cared about permanents in your graveyard. This just cares about cards. It doesn't matter what they are. So that's Threshold. So now we're going to get into our archetypes. So every limited set usually has 10 archetypes. Sometimes they only do 5 for the guilds and whatnot. But in this set, there are 10 archetypes, and all of them are focused on a creature type. And so when you look at Azorius, which is blue and white, it's going to be focused on birds, which is very flavorful because Azorius has historically been the flying colors. And Azorius here is all about flying, okay? So this first slide is going to have your signposts, right? So a signpost is basically Wizards of the Coast giving you a card and saying, here's what this thing does. So all 3 of these have blue and white and their mana cost. And let's look at the common here. Seed Pod Squire, he's a 4 mana, blue and white hybrid. All of the signpost commons have hybrid mana, whereas the uncommons and rares, you have to have both colors. So this Seed Pod Squire, he's a 3/3 flyer. Whenever he attacks, target creature you control without flying gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And so this Azorius combo is kind of weird in that it cares about your creatures having flying, but it also cares about your creatures not having flying specifically, and maybe even giving them flying. As we see with the Signpost Uncommon, it's a 3 mana 2/3 flying, and when it or another creature you control with flying ETBs, you get a counter on something, but only if it doesn't have flying. So it's a very weird kind of situation where you want creatures with flying and creatures without flying. And then the rare here, 5 mana, 4/5 flying. First of all, beautiful stat line. And then he says, whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player. Remember, birds mostly have flying, so whenever they attack, they're going to be hitting the opponent more often than not. You get to choose one of these things. And this is only once, right? Because there's one or more birds. It doesn't just say whenever a bird. So you're only going to get to do one of these things. You may put a bird creature card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. That's huge. That means replay all your birds at least only once, because finality counter, if you're unaware, if whenever that thing dies, you exile it. Put a counter on each bird you control, so make them all bigger, or just draw a card, right? So all of those modes are good. This card is awesome. I think this one is dope. If I'm going to build a commander that's a bird, this is going to be my go-to right here. So we have the flying matters. These are the signposts for this. But also I wanted to talk about some enablers and some payoffs for each color combo. So if you're looking at the enabler, the Finch formation, 3 mana, and real quick, enablers and payoffs, I specifically only chose commons. I only wanted to do commons because whenever people build decks, they usually want awesome uncommons, awesome rares. But sometimes we forget we need to have commons that, that make our deck actually work. And so whenever we're looking for enablers, Finch formation is a perfect one. 3 mana, 2/2, flying. But it also has offspring, so you can pay a little extra mana to get another token of this. But whenever this creature enters, target creature you control gains flying. So all those creatures that you're playing that don't have flying, you're giving them flying. You're increasing that ability to stack and trigger with all these other things that want to deal combat damage. Then you have a payoff here. This is just a payoff for being in this color combo, right? So counter target creature spell unless it's counter target spell, not creature spell, unless controller pays to. Now that for 2 mana, we've seen that in lots of limited sets. It's a mid-level card, but if you control a bird, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4. That is very good, right? This is not double blue, which is a lot of the just counter target spell cards. This is blue in a colorless, but if you control, I mean, obviously there's a stipulation here, so it's not going to be as good as, just a basic counter spell. But it's got, I think it's a good card in limited. I think it can really pull this bird deck together because it'll hold back the opponent on the early stages. If you can get an early bird out and hold up 2 mana a turn, you might have something to do here. And then I just wanted to throw in one more notable card to talk about with each color combo. And so this Shrike Force, 3 mana, 1/3, flying double strike vigilance. I love this card. I think this card, first of all, will play in any white deck. I think it's just that good. It just has amazing potential. The double strike vigilance combo is amazing. It having flying, getting to attack lots of turns. It's just a good card. This can play, well, like I already said, it can play outside of this combo pretty easily, especially with, if you look at the Plume Creed Mentor and Castrol, you're getting some synergies there that interact with just the Shrike Force. So this card is going to be good. Take it if you get it in a draft. It'll be there for you. So next up we have Orzhov, and the Orzhov are the bats. Not a huge fan of bats in real life. Bats scare me. Bats terrify me. But these bats are kind of cool. So the bat mechanic is all about losing and gaining life on your turn. And all the bats give you bonuses if you can pull that off. So we've got, once again, our signposts here. Moonrise Cleric is a 3 mana with 2 hybrid black and white mana. It's a 2/3 flying. Whenever it attacks, you gain a life. So what this is just giving you that bonus. It's giving you that ability to gain that life every turn. This is an example of a good enabler for your deck. So your signpost uncommon is Starseer Mentor, 5 mana. That's a lot of mana, right? It's a 3/5 flying vigilance. So for 5 mana, that's just worth it. At the beginning of your instep, if you gained or lost life this turn, target opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. Now this one is one of those cards that gives your opponents choices. I don't like those cards very much, but this could really take over a game if you can grind it out a little bit. And as you see, the bats all kind of have this higher toughness, and so they're kind of built to be good blockers. That's kind of part of the point of the bats. And so I think this uncommon has potential. I'm not super high on the bats, but I think it definitely carry a little bit. And then our signpost rare here is Zorline, the Cosmos Caller, 3 mana, 3/3 flying vigilance. So excellent stats. Whenever a bat you control attacks, you gain a life. And so that's stackable, right? All of your bats can attack and you gain a bunch of life every turn. And then whenever Zorlian enters or attacks, you may pay 2 and 2 life. So all that life gain you're getting, this is one of those things you can pay into. When you do, return target non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter. And so we're kind of seeing that recursion some more, bringing things back from the graveyard. It could be a great payoff. It can do a lot of things for you. I think this is an awesome rare and awesome art too. So then for our enablers and payoffs, I put the 2 mana 1/2 flying Life Creed duo. One of the cheaper bats you'll find. Whenever another creature you control enters, gain a life. I've seen that ability a million times. A good version of that ability is usually on a 1 mana creature, but this helps enable your life gain every turn. A good payoff. Actually, not a great payoff, but it is a payoff. 4 mana 2/4 flying vigilance. So once again, we're seeing that bigger butt on the creature, that bigger toughness, and smaller attack, but it has vigilance, so it gets to attack and then it gets to block. And whenever you gain or lose life during your turn, Waxwing Witness gets +1/+0, and that does not have a cap on it. And so if you can pay life and gain life a bunch of times in your turn, this thing could get really big, really scary. So I think it actually could be a good payoff. And then finally, just one other notable card I think that could play well in the deck. 3 mana 1/3 flying Death Touch Moonstone Harbinger. Right? Whenever you gain or lose life during your turn, bats you control get +1/+0 and gain Death Touch. So that's only once a turn, but this pumps your whole team. And right, you only need to do this once. So, play a creature with your Life Creed duo on the battlefield, triggers Moonstone Harbinger, triggers Waxwing Witness. Suddenly you're getting all these big creatures that are all flying and they all have Death Touch. So this is a very, I think, good 1-2 punch right here. I think this deck, this deck started out whenever the set started getting revealed. I didn't think this deck was going to work. Whenever I saw this signpost uncommon, it immediately drew me back to Ixalan, red-black Descend, right? Trigger this ability during your turn, get an effect at the end of your turn. And I think that could play out with the uncommon, we'll see. But the rest of this is so much better than that. And also it relates to something more natural in a turn, right? So whenever in black-red Descend in Ixalan, it didn't really make a whole lot of... You weren't getting rid of a lot of cards on your turn. But here, you're getting a lot of life or you're losing a lot of life, depending on how you're playing it. Hopefully you're doing both, so that way you can gain these benefits a lot during your turn. I think this one has a lot more potential, and also you're just playing a lot of flying creatures. That's a good way to win Magic games, in limited at least. Play a lot of flying. So that's the bats. Moving forward, we have... I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. This is home run, I think the best archetype in limited. We have the Boros Mice, and they're all about Valiant. They're all about targeting your own creatures. So for our signpost uncommon, we have Veteran Guard Mouse, 4 mana 3/4 Valiant. Whenever he becomes a target of a spell or ability you control, he gets +1/+0 and first strike. So he's a 4/4 first striker on your turn, and you get to scry. So he's just a good creature. That's a good rate for a creature. Getting to scry every turn, if you can trigger this, obviously you have to be able to trigger it, is great. The signpost uncommon, Seaglaive Mentor, 3 mana 3/2 Vigilance Haste. That is a good stat line. Valiant, whenever he becomes a target of a spell or ability, put a counter on it. So this is the kind of thing where you target it, you get the benefit, it gains a benefit this turn, but this creature is gaining benefits. It stacks up as it goes. It's getting those counters to get bigger and bigger, and it's got vigilance. So the more it attacks, the more creatures, hopefully they're chump blocking, then you get to block other creatures. It's just a great card. Great signpost uncommon. And then our signpost rare, this is like the first card spoiled from the whole set. Mabel, Heir to Craig Flame, 3 mana 3/3. Other mice get +1/+1. That by itself would be enough. Whenever Mabel enters, you create this legendary sword. It gives +1/+1 vigilance, trample, and haste. Does a lot of stuff. I don't know that the rest of that even matters really. Mabel's just cool. Pumping all your mice up is very good. And notably, it doesn't actually target things. For newer players, just know this. Unless it says target, it doesn't target. So you need to have things that say the word target creature or whatever in order to be able to get these benefits from Valiant. So moving forward, for our enablers and payoffs, you'll see this Thistle Down players, which, first of all, this art is excellent. It's just beautiful. But it's a 3-mana 3/3. Whenever it attacks, untap target non-land permanent. So basically, you're going to swing in with your 3/3, and then you're going to target one of your Valiant creatures. So just to play it out for you, you have Thistle Down players, you have Veteran Guard Mouse. You attack with both of them. Thistle Down players will trigger. It will untap your Veteran Guard Mouse. He will get +1/+0. He'll become a 4/4. He'll have first strike, and it'll scry. Right? That's just from 2 cards. And so if you can trigger this Valiant, you're going to be getting a huge benefit, a huge bonus. And the good thing about the mice is all the mice are cheap. So you're going to be able to play these spells, multiple spells in a turn to target these things, as long as you can build the right kind of deck for it. This is probably one of the more synergy-focused decks in the format. So you're going to want to be able to target your mice every turn so you can get these benefits. And then with Nettle Guard, this is just a common payoff, not the best one. But it's a 2-mana 3/1. That's a fine stat line. And it has Valiant. Whenever he becomes ability, or the target ability, he gets +0/+2. So he becomes a 3/3, a 2-mana 3/3, which is pretty good stat line by itself. And then for 1 mana, you can sack him, destroy target artifact or enchantment. That's just kind of thrown on there. It's a good ability to have, but not super important to the mice themselves. And then this other notable card, this card is amazing, I think. It's a 1-mana 1/1. So, first of all, with mice, you're going to be wanting to play 1-mana mice. It's going to increase your aggressiveness, your ability to win the game fast, which is what the mice want to do here. So, 1-mana 1/1, Valiant, comes to target of a spell ability, put a counter on it. So, you're going to be getting counters on this creature as you go. It's going to be getting bigger and bigger. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So, let's just say you play this thing on turn 1. And let's say you can target it, 2 or 3 times. It's turn 5. It's a 3/3 or a 4/4. You're going to get to attack with this thing, trade off with a creature, Valiant, maybe you play a +1/+0 spell. It trades off with something, deals 5 damage to the opponent. That could be a game ender right there if you've gotten in enough damage early. Right, this card, I think, will end a lot of games, actually. It's going to make it really hard for your opponent to react and respond. So that's our mice. Moving forward, Selesnya rabbits. The rabbits, some of these rabbits are really cute, and then this Beauregard Mentor just grosses me out. I do not know why. But rabbits are all about tokens and counters. It's your typical Selesnya shenanigans. This is what Selesnya does. But looking at our signpost here, Head of the Homestead, 5 mana. That's a lot of mana for this kind of creature. But it's a 3/2, enters with 2 1/1 rabbits. That's a great thing for this archetype, right? So a 3/2, a 1/1, a 1/1 for 5 mana. That's okay. That's fine. It's only a common, so we don't expect a crazy amount from it. But you're going to see that that's going to be something that really helps this archetype out a lot. With the Signpost Uncommon, it's a trample, 2 mana. Beauregard Mentor's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. And so, as you can see, this really is more about the go wide strategy. Get as many creatures as you can, and then this Beauregard Mentor is going to be huge, massive. So those are Signpost Common, and you can see how the Signpost Common and Uncommon play together, right? You play your Beauregard Mentor, you play a 3-drop, you play a 4-drop, you slam down the Head of the Homestead. Now you've got 6 creatures on the battlefield. You have a 2-mana 6/6 with Trample. I mean, just an incredible synergy there. And then our Signpost Rare is Phineas, Ace Archer. I love the bow, or the arrow there with the pine cone on the tip. I think that's dope. But it's a Vigilance Reach 2/2 for 2 mana. Whenever he attacks, put a counter on each other creature you control. That's a token or a rabbit. So right there, he's an instant awesome payoff for all your rabbits that you're playing. Then if creatures you control have a total power of 10 or greater, draw a card. So, I mean, if you're just looking at these 3 cards, right? 2 mana, play Beauregard. 2 mana, play Phineas. 5 mana, play Homestead. You got 5 rabbits on the battlefield. You're going to put +1/+1 counters on all of them, and your Beauregard Mentor is going to be a 5/5. And so you're going to hit this 10 power. You're going to be able to draw cards. The only thing here is, are you going to be able to attack with Phineas without him dying? And maybe it only happens once. Maybe you only get to attack with them once. But hopefully you can finesse your way into attack with Phineas every turn. So, yeah, he's a cool rare. So for our enabler, I put the carrot cake. I mean, come on. Look at that. Look how awesome that is. 2 mana artifact food. Whenever it enters and whenever you sacrifice it, so you get this triggers twice, create a 1/1 rabbit and scry 1. So a lot of that incidental scry people scoff at, but that incidental scry can be very important to your game. You could be in the later stages of the game, pull the carrot cake, you're kind of angry, like, ugh, whatever, and then you play the carrot cake, you scry, oh, there's a land on top, I'm going to bottom that. You go ahead and sacrifice it, gain the 3 life, get your extra rabbit, scry again, there's a land on top, don't want that. Then you draw for your next turn and you hit, your big bomb, right? That scry can really save you sometimes, and so people scoff at it. It's very important in some games. And so getting 2 rabbit tokens for 4 mana is not great, but you're gaining the life, you're getting the scry. I think there's some potential here. I think it's a fine enabler. Not like something you take in a draft, top 3 pick, but definitely something that when it comes to you on the wheel, you're happy to get. For our payoff, we have the Warren Elder, 2 mana 2/2, which is just, absolutely most basic stat line. But it has a 4 mana. Creatures you control get +1/+1. So pump your team for 4 mana, right? And you're going to have all these 1/1 little rabbit tokens. So you're going to be able to turn them all into 2/2s. And if you have an 8 mana, you can turn them all into 3/3s. For our other notable card for this set, I just put Hop to It. I think Hop to It is fine. I think it's good in this deck. 3 mana, get 3 1/1s. That's a baseline stat you already are fine with. 3 mana, 3/3 is fine. But in the context of this archetype, you're going to get so much value from those 3 1/1s than you would a 3/3, right? 1 creature as opposed to 3 creatures is a huge difference here. So that's going to be our Selesnya rabbits. So coming out of the rabbits, out of all their shenanigans, we have the rats. And I'll just go ahead and let you know, I think the rats are not very good. So the signpost common for the rats, Mind Drill Assailant. I mean, that's a cool card. Kind of a creepy art. I mean, I guess all rats are kind of creepy, but it's a 4 mana 2/5, which is kind of a weird stat line. It's fine. It has threshold, so if you get you get those 7 cards in your graveyard, it's going to be a 5/5, which is pretty good. 4 mana 5/5 is fine. And then you can pay 3 to surveil 1, so that can help you get to that threshold. But 3 mana to surveil 1, not great. So you're gonna need to be doing nothing on your turn in order to trigger that. So you don't want to be doing that. So yeah, the signpost uncommon, Tidecaller Mentor, 3 mana 3/3 with menace. It's fine. And then with threshold, when it enters, if 7 more cards in your graveyard, return 1 non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This is, I think, the worst signpost uncommon. So, first of all, you need threshold. That's not easy to get, and especially for 3 mana, if you have this thing on turn 3, and you don't have any other 3-drop, you kind of have to play it, and you're definitely not going to have threshold by that turn. So, its ETB doesn't matter all that much, and also it only happens when it enters. It doesn't even have the when it enters or attacks text that a lot of these kinds of cards do. And then on top of that, even if you do trigger this, returns to 1 non-land permanent to its owner's hand, you're bouncing something else. Most of that, it's whatever. It's honestly not even that great of a payoff for what you have to do to get here. I think this one is pretty bad. Not going to lie. And then for a signpost rare, we just jump into the one card that I definitely want to build a commander out of, which is really funny. Vren, the Relentless. 4 mana 3/4, Ward 2, Ward and limited, nothing to scoff at, or especially in these faster formats. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile instead. So kill an opponent's creature, it doesn't go to its graveyard, which actually is a big deal in this set because there's actually a lot of graveyard recursion going on. At the beginning of each end step, so not just your own, they're in step 2, create X 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature gets +1/+1 for each other rat you control, which by itself is awesome. And then how many do you get? X is the number of creatures your opponents control that were exiled this turn. So if you can be killing your opponent's creatures, you're going to be compounding these rats that get bigger the more rats you have. This guy can go crazy. You have to have the right deck for it. You have to have a very controlling deck, but he could do a lot of damage. Looking at our enablers here, and I struggled to find good enablers. This one's fine, but past this, especially at common, not much here. But Dagger Fang Duo, 3 mana, 3/2, Rat Squirrel. He has Death Touch, so actually this is a pretty good stat line, I would say, especially with all the 1/1 tokens running around. He has Death Touch, and whenever he enters the battlefield, you mill 2. So you're going to take the top 2 cards of your library, put them in your graveyard. That's gonna get you closer to your threshold. He's your enabler for this combo. And once again, struggled to find good enablers for this. And then for your payoff, this Night Whirl Hermit, 3 mana, 1/4 with Vigilance, which that stat line is not great anymore. It used to be something, now it's just kind of whatever. And in Threshold, it becomes +1/+0, and it can't be blocked. That's not bad. A 2/4 Vigilance that can't be blocked is actually pretty good. But once again, you have to have that threshold. And that's the thing. That's the problem that I think will sink this archetype, is that getting threshold is going to be way more difficult than people expect it to be. And then your final notable card is the Mind Whisker, 3 mana, 3/2. Beginning of your upkeep, Surveil 1. So every turn you're going to be putting a card in your graveyard, most likely. That Surveil, you're going to look at it, unless it's your bomb rare, throw it in the graveyard, who cares? You need to get to threshold. So 3 mana, put a card in your graveyard every turn. And then if you hit the threshold, all of your opponent's creatures get -1, -1, -0. Doesn't matter a whole lot, but it could in a game. If it had -1, -1, then that would be mind-blowingly good. I would probably say that would be a mythic level uncommon. But in this case, it's just okay. So that's your rats. I'm sorry if I dashed your dreams there with the rats. I don't think the rats can be very good, but hey, prove me wrong. Go out there, destroy with the rats, and we'll see what happens. Moving forward, we have the Izzet otters. Is it otters? It is. But I don't have any good, what do you call those things? Soundtracks. But anyways, Izzet otters, all about prowess, all about casting non-creature spells. So Signpost common here, Tempest Angler, 3 mana, 2/2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a counter on this. No cap, and I don't mean lying. I mean, there's no cap. There's no limit to this. You just get to keep putting counters on this. So if you can cast 3 or 4, not 3 or 4, that's probably insane, but like 2 or 3 non-creature spells in a turn, you're going to get 2 counters, 3 counters every turn. You can't sustain that kind of spell slinging in limited, but this thing could get big without doing a whole lot. Your Signpost uncommon, Stormcatch Mentor, 2 mana, 1/1. So a lot of these otters are undercosted, but that's because they have this prowess. They have these, gaining all this power and toughness from casting non-creature spells. So it's a 2 mana, 1/1 with haste and prowess. And instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is a great Signpost uncommon, because a lot of these instant and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. In limited, they're usually on an enchantment. They're usually on, you have to do something to get this. It's usually like kind of difficult to get this ability. And even if you do get it, it's on a permanent type, or it's just not that available to you. This is extremely available to you. It's on a creature that you like the body of, right? It's got haste and prowess. It's a 1/1, but it can get bigger, and it enables all of the rest of your entire strategy. I think this is a home run Signpost uncommon for blue-red. You have the Signpost rare, Alania, the Divergent Storm. 5 mana, 3/5, so a little expensive. But whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant sorcery spell, or if it's the first instant spell, the first sorcery spell, or the first otter spell other than Alania you've cast this turn, you may have target opponent draw a card. So if you cast an instant, cast sorcery, cast an otter, give your opponent a card. It's almost like giving them a gift. If you do, copy your spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is crazy good. Giving your opponents cards is scary, but this does not say this only triggers once. You can cast an instant, you can cast a sorcery, you can cast an otter, and give your opponent 3 cards and copy 3 spells. This is just bonkers good, especially if you're playing sorcery or instant speed removal spells. You're clearing your opponent's board. If you're casting Otter, let's say you have Alania, you cast your Stormcatch Mentor. You get 2 of those bad boys, both with haste, both with prowess, both with making your instant sorceries cheaper. This stuff can just go off. This can be a huge combo piece. That being said, it is 5 mana. I do think this set will be faster, so who knows if you get to that point. But I think an unbelievably good rare, especially because you're only giving your opponent a card. Now, giving your opponent a card in limited, not a good idea. But if you're copying spells to do it and you're killing their creatures, I think it's fine. So for our enablers and payoffs, you have Shore Up. And this is the perfect kind of enabler. 1 mana, instant, so non-creature spell, and then it does something, right? As long as it does something, it's probably going to be a good enabler. In this case, it gives something hexproof. So let's say your opponent plays his Fel, the 2 mana sorcery, kill your creature. You just tap 1 blue, play your Shore Up. You get your triggers off your casting your non-creature spells. You get to untap whatever the creature is. That may not matter, but it gains hexproof. So their spell fizzles and your spell triggers all your stuff. Just an insanely good card for this kind of deck. Any cheap instant sorcery spell is going to be good for this deck. Then you got your payoff. This is a pretty simple payoff. Pearl of Wisdom, 3 mana. It costs 1 less to cast if you control Otter. Literally a payoff for being in the Otter deck. Draw 2 cards. So 3 mana draw 2 is whatever. 2 mana draw 2, pretty good. We saw that in Ixalan with Charter Course. It's just a playable card in lots of formats, actually. So if you're getting those cheap Otters out, this card can be really good in your deck because you're going to have an Otter to do this. For the other notable card here, I put the Harnesser of Storms. Whenever you cast a non-creature or Otter spell, you may exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. So you're casting these non-creature spells, the Shore Up. You're going to get some cards from it. That's going to really help you snowball, right? If you're going to be able to cast a lot. If you have a lot of cheap ones, now you have to build the deck with the mana cost in mind. Because if you have a bunch of 4+ mana cards and you're exiling them, you're just throwing them away for the most part. But if you have a lot of Shore Ups and Pearls of Wisdom that are cheap, that give you some benefit, you're going to be able to cast more than one at a turn. You're going to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And this is going to help you get to that point. It's only triggers once per turn, but it helps you get further ahead. That's what the Otters need to do to win. Next up, we have the Frogs. And the Frogs, I don't know. The Frogs are the biggest question mark to me. Definitely need to play with them to really gain the understanding of them. But the Frogs are all about bouncing creatures. If I had a soundboard, I would go but again, because that's what the Frogs are. It's just a big joke because frogs bounce. You get it. They jump. I don't know. I think someone at Wizards literally was like, we need a creature type. Let's do frogs. What's the mechanic for frogs? Well, frogs jump, don't they? I think that's about the extent of the R&D right there. So for our Signpost Common, we have the Pond Prophet. I love this Signpost Common. I think the Signpost Common is probably the best Signpost Common there is. 2 mana, hybrid. Whenever he enters, draw a card. He's a 1/1, right? His body doesn't matter, though. What matters is 2 mana, draw a card, get a creature. And because of the context of this archetype, you should be able to do this more than once. That's where this card really shines, is where you can bounce it and play it again. So for your Signpost Uncommon, the Lily Splash Mentor, 4 mana, 4/4, which is honestly kind of funny. We don't see that stat line very much in this set. Usually that's one of the most basic stat lines you can find. There's tons of creatures that are 4 mana, 4/4s. This is one of the rare ones in this set. A lot of these creatures are undersized in this set. So it's a 4 mana, 4/4 with reach. There is so much reach in this set. It's actually crazy. I probably should have talked more about that during the birds and the bats. But it's got reach. You can pay 3 mana, exile another creature you control, return it with a counter on it. You can only do that as a sorcery. So Lily Splash Mentor, you play it next turn, pay 3 mana, exile your Pond Prophet, bring it back. It's a 2/2, and you draw a card. So that's kind of what we're seeing here with the Frogs. It's all about taking your creatures off the battlefield, putting them back on to gain more benefit. And then your Signpost Rare, Clement, the Worrywart. 3 mana, 3/3 Vigilance, pretty good stat line. Whenever he or another creature you control enters, return up to one target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner hand. Up to one target creature. So you can choose. So he's going to allow you to keep playing your stuff. I think the real point of this card, or the real benefit, is that frogs can tap for mana. And you can only cast creatures, but this is going to be a very creature-focused archetype. So Clement is going to allow you to tap these creatures for mana, bounce them to your hand, play them again. Right now, when they enter the battlefield, they won't be able to tap for mana. But up until that point, you can tap all your creatures, bounce them all to your hand, play them back out with all that mana, and now you have untapped creatures. They get all their bonuses again. I think Clement is awesome. I'm really hoping I can build a really fun Simic, bounce creatures deck. So for our enabler, 2 mana instant run away together. Might be my favorite art of the whole set. I think that it's awesome. They're just going away together on their own way. But at 2 mana, return 2 creatures controlled by different players. So you bounce your own creature, bounce their creature. Which 2 mana to bounce their creature is usually what the stat... it usually has some sort of stipulation. Here, it's bounce your own creature. But if you're in frogs, you want to be doing that. So this is a great enabler for your deck, and it also maybe helps you slow them down, right? Because this might be a little slower of a archetype. You might want to get your stuff set up so you can get these benefits from bouncing your creatures. And then your payoff here, probably my favorite common payoff, 4 mana Polywallop. Dope name for a card, dope art for a card. Instant speed. This costs 1 less for each frog you control. So you can get this thing down to 1 mana relatively easily, I would say. There's enough frogs where you can play enough to get this thing to 1 mana. And it's instant speed. This instant speed is so good. Green misses out on instant speed stuff so much in Limited. But this is instant speed. Target creature you control deals damage. Doesn't fight. It deals damage. It's twice its power to target creature you don't control. This is amazing. This is probably my favorite removal spell. Obviously, it's still creature related, so whatever. People will come after it and say it sucks. But I think this card could be just absolutely amazing for the frogs. This might be one of the most necessary cards in the frog deck in order to keep it viable, keep it on pace with these other decks that are faster. And then for your other notable card, 3 mana, 2/3, Long River Lurker. Ward 1, all frogs have Ward 1. That's big. Making all of your opponent's spells that try to kill your frogs cost an extra is huge. And then when he enters, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So let's go back. Your 4/4 can't be blocked this turn, right? Whenever that creature deals combat damage this turn, you may exile it. If you do, return it to the battlefield. So once again, it's allowing you to do that bounce thing. It's giving you a huge benefit to all your creatures. I think this card is awesome. Definitely one that you want in your frog decks. So following that up, you got lizards. We got our amphibians out here representing. Lizards are amphibians? Lizards are reptiles. Whatever, who cares? Biology is stupid. So lizards are all about dealing damage to your opponent. They just want to get in, right? That's their whole thing. So your signpost common, Cindering Cutthroat. His armor is just awesome. I mean, it's hilarious. What is that helmet even doing, really? I don't know. But he's a 3 mana 3/2. He enters with a counter on it if opponent lost life this turn. So if you can deal some damage to your opponent, he's a 3 mana 4/3. And then you can pay 2, give him menace, right? Nothing crazy. I think he's fine on rate. And if you can deal the damage every turn, he's a 4/3. He gains menace. Menace can be big. So he's fine. He's pretty... I would say he's kind of underwhelming, actually. But anyways, signpost uncommon, Fireglass Mentor. Also awesome art. I think the lizards might be my favorite art. Just overall, I think they're all cute and funny. So he's a 2 mana 2/1. Kind of not great stats. At the beginning of your second main phase, so just FYI, your first main phase happens. That's where you play your cards and stuff. Then you go to combat. Then you enter your second main phase, which is where you can also play cards and stuff. So at the beginning of your second main phase, after combat, if an opponent lost life this turn, so you'll get the opportunity to attack them, Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. Until end of turn, you may play that card. So this is going to be great. This is going to be amazing because the lizards are all going to be super aggressive. They're going to want you to lose life every single turn. And if you can get them to lose life every turn, you're going to be drawing cards every turn too. Drawing an extra card every turn, and especially you get to pick. That's the big thing here. You're drawing 2 and picking 1 to play. It's just amazing. So you don't play anything on your first main with the lizards if you can help it. And I think this is going to be a really good signpost uncommon if the lizards work. Right, and then your signpost rare Gev, once again, just amazing art. Look at him. Look at how cute he is. He's got fire. Like I want to hold him, even though he burned me. Right, but he's a 2-mana 3/2 ward, pay 2 life. That's a fine ward. We're seeing ward a lot more these days, and throwing it in on here, I'm fine with it. Other creatures you control enter with an additional counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. So that's obviously a little bit of a commandery text, but he has the Cindering Cutthroat text, but he gives it to all your creatures, which is really cool. And then whenever you cast a lizard, so the more lizards you play, the better he does. Gev deals 1 damage to target opponent. So if you can play a lizard on your turn, if you can deal some damage to your turn, he's going to do his thing, right? He's going to give them counters. He's going to deal damage to them. He's going to do a lot for you if you can get him. He's a rare, right? There's no guarantee he'll be in your deck, but he's a dope rare at that. So for our enabler, a Gate Blade Assassin. I mean, come on, look at that. Look at it. Would you just look at it? 2 mana 1/3. Fine. Whenever a Gate Assassin attacks, defending player loses a life and you gain a life. So this thing doesn't even have to deal damage to do its thing. It's just, taking their life away, right? And so he's going to trigger all of your stuff here, right? And then you have your payoff. This is your payoff for being in this deck. 3 mana, instant, costs 1 less to cast for each lizard. So once again, you can get this thing to 1 mana pretty easily. Target creature gets +2/+0, lifelink, indestructible. I mean, that is a really good combat trick. Lifelink and indestructible and +2/+0, getting to kill something. Really, really good combat trick, especially if it costs 1 mana. And then another notable card, I kind of struggled to find a really good one. I think this one's pretty good. So it's a 2 mana gift a treasure. So you don't have to give your opponent a treasure, but you can give your opponent a treasure you're going to deal 2 damage to target creature. So you're going to just do that. If you give your opponent a treasure, give them a little ramp, not a whole lot, just a little bit. And there's not much artifact synergy in this set, so giving him a treasure is nothing more really than some ramp. But if the gift was promised, if you give them that treasure, deal 3 damage to them. And so with this super fast deck, I think if you have 2 copies of Blooming Blast, right, that's 6 damage you can kind of count on. So if you can get some early damage in, maybe that could wrap up the game for you, right? I think this is going to be a super aggressive deck. You're going to want to win, turn 5, turn 6, if you can, obviously. It's sometimes hard to set that up. But with the lizards, I think they have the potential. They are cheap enough, and you can make them cheaper, right? There's some cards that benefit from having lizards and make them easier to play. So I think we'll see the lizards deal a lot of damage. You better watch out. So that's the lizards. Up next, we have the squirrels. I hate the squirrels. Chatterfang can die. Sorry. I know maybe I'll lose some fans over that. The non-existent ones as of right now. But the squirrels are the black-green combo here. They're all about foraging, all about food, and exiling cards from your graveyard. So for a signpost uncommon, Corpseberry Cultivator. Look at that little squisher thing. He's a 2/3 for 3 mana. At the beginning of a combat on your turn, you may forage. So you can just forage every turn if you want. Whenever you forage, put a counter on him. And so he's going to pay you off for foraging, right? He's going to give you those counters, make himself bigger. I wish he had maybe like Menace or maybe a little something. He is just a common, so you don't need that stuff. But he's okay. He's fine. I would say compared to like Cindering, Cutthroat, he's somewhat equal. I would probably put Corpseberry a little higher than him. So then you have your signpost uncommon. Whenever he enters the battlefield or dies, create a food. You need this kind of card. If you're going to be in this deck, you need this kind of card that creates foods. because you're not going to be able to exile 3 cards from your graveyard all the time. It's got diminishing returns, right? You can mill 9 cards, but that means you can only do the thing 3 times, and then you're done foraging. If you're building a forage deck, you need cards that make food. And FYI, there aren't that many in the set. There aren't as many as you would want, I should say. So then for our signpost rare, Camellia the Seed Miser, 3 mana, 3/3 with Menace. Other scrolls have Menace. That's a big deal in Limited. Giving all your scrolls Menace is huge. And then whenever you sacrifice 1 or more foods, create a 1/1 squirrel. So if you can forage, you get more squirrels. Pay 2 and forage, right? So you're going to be able to sacrifice. Put a counter on each other scroll you control. So this thing, if you have the food, that's a big if. But if you have the food, you're creating squirrels and you're getting you're getting counters on all of them. So this thing can really speed your game up if you can get the food. Once again, if. That's the big question with this archetype. If. Looking at our enablers, 2 mana, instant saver. I love the art on this one. That's just a cool eye. Target creature gets -2/-2. We've seen that for 2 mana. We've seen it for 1 mana, but this also gives you a food token. So pretty basic enabler. You're getting that food. Hopefully you can remove a creature. So that's what Saver does. I think it's a fine enabler. I wish there were more foods to be created here, but that's what it does. Your payoff is a 4 mana 2/4 with reach. Once again, lots of reach. Whenever he enters, you may forage. So if you have the food, you can forage. If you do, draw a card. So this is a good enabler, right? You're getting to draw that card. That card could be another food. It could be whatever. So you could get a card for free, right? 4 mana 2/4 with reach is kind of whatever, honestly. But being able to draw a card is always good. And then another notable card I put, 3 mana 1/1 with trample. This is a squirrel. When he enters, put a +1/+1 on it for each other squirrel and or food you control. So if let's just say you have 2 foods, 3 squirrels. He's entering the battlefield as a 6/6. 3 mana 6/6 with trample. I would be careful of that. Then on top of that, not only does he do that, whenever another squirrel or food you control enters, put a counter. So he just gets bigger. All your squirrels and foods feed into this guy. I think this might be the build around card, right? Obviously, if you get Camellia, go for it, right? But Honored Dray Leader might be the one card you really want to build around. Like, because if you can get Vine Reap Mentor, right? You create a squirrel and food. So it's giving you those 2 counters. You're getting, if you can get cards that do both at the same time, give you squirrels, give you foods, this guy, you play him, let's say you play him on turn 5, he could enter in as a 10/10. Who knows, right? You just have to be able to trigger these foods and get this stuff on the battlefield. So we'll see. We'll see with the squirrels. I'm not high on the squirrels. Personally, I don't think there's enough food in the set. That's just what I think. Moving forward, actually, this is our last archetype, is the raccoons. And I started out really high on the raccoons. I don't know why. I can't remember exactly, but I thought they were super cool. After the set's been released, I think they're okay. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see with the raccoons. Honestly, they're close to the frogs with I just don't know how they're going to play in the set as well. So the raccoons are all about expending, and typically, pretty much always, it's expend 4. Spend 4 mana on your turn to gain some benefits. So your signpost common is 5 mana, 4/5. So right off the bat, he gets your expend. Whenever you build this deck, your mana value on your cards needs to be one of your top priorities. Having raccoons is good, but if you can't spend 4 mana on your turn because you only have 2 drops, which is somewhat likely in this set, there's a lot of 2 and 3 mana cards in this set, so you might struggle to hit that expend, but this card helps you hit that expend. So there's a 5 mana 4/5 trample. That's a good stat line in this set. Because there's not that many powerful creatures. Whenever you expend 4, he gets +2/+1 until end of turn. So he becomes a 6/6. So if you can give him haste, he enters the battlefield as a 6/6 with trample. That's pretty good. I think he's okay. I think he can do some work. Probably more than the squirrels and more than the lizards. Then you have your signpost uncommon. So this is, signpost uncommon is usually what you want to look at when you're really deciding whether or not the deck is going to do something good. 2 mana 2/2. So doesn't trigger expend. But whenever you expend 4, put a counter on this. So you're getting expending, you're going to get counters on this thing. It'll get bigger. And he taps for mana, right? So he's going to let you expend. So turn 2, you play this guy. Turn 3, play your land. Tap it all to expend 4. You play your 4-drop, right? And then he's going to be a 3/3. So if you can expend 4, turn 3, 4, and 5, he'll be a 6/6. Or 3, 4, 5. He'll be a 5/5. Counting, clearly not my strong suit. But the Wandertail Mentor, I think he's definitely a good card in your deck. You want him in your deck. I don't know if he's going to do enough in your deck. That's the problem I'm seeing, I think, with him. And then your signpost rare, 3 mana 2/4, Murra, Trash Tactician. So first of all, awesome name, awesome card. Well, not the name, just the title. At the beginning of your first main phase, add mana for each raccoon you control. That's really good. If you can get some raccoons out on the battlefield, you're going to get more mana, so you can play more cards, so you can expend 4. Whenever you expend 4, gain 3 life. That's huge in limited. That could be game-changing in limited if you can get that on your turn every time. And then if you can expend 8, which I don't even know if I would recommend doing that. Maybe you want to spread out your expend 4s rather than get your expend 8. But if you can do it, exile 2 cards, you can play them. So if you can spend 8 mana, you can play these cards. And it says until the end of your next turn. That's really important, because if it said until the end of this turn, you probably wouldn't be able to play them because you already spent 8 mana. But I think this rare is really, really good for this deck. So this might be the kind of rare where if you get it, you look more at this deck. Whereas if you don't get it, you might not be as interested in playing this archetype. So for our enabler, Rush Shield Rampager, really we're only looking for 4 mana cards. We're looking for cards that hit your expend. I was trying to find a good mana sink, a card that you have on the battlefield that you can spend mana to do something with. There's not really. I mean, I couldn't find a good one. Maybe I didn't look hard enough, but 4 mana, 4/4. You can offspring it for 2, so that means you can pay 2, give it an extra 1/1. And this creature can't be blocked by creatures of power 2 or less. So, the body and all that stuff is fine. But really, it's just about getting that 4 mana paid. And then for a payoff, 3 mana 3/2 with trample, that's fine. Trample on a creature with bad toughness is kind of whatever. But whenever you expend 4, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains trample to end of your turn. So this archetype is going to have bigger creatures. This is red-green. This is our big creatures archetype. And so if you can hit this payoff, if you can hit the expend 4, you're giving your creatures trample, and your opponents are going to have little things. So hopefully you can trample over them and be able to, win games that way. That's our payoff here. One other notable card I think for this deck is this Quake Tusk Boar. This 5 mana 5/5 reach, trample, haste. That could be a very important game card for you, right? You play this on your turn. You're hitting your expend all at once. You can buff this creature with all your expend triggers. Then you get to attack. It has trample. I think it could be a really important card for the deck. We'll see. But it's not a raccoon, so maybe not. I just think it plays well in the deck. So that's our Gruul raccoons. Once again, sorry if I wasn't super enthused with them. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to be able to expend every turn with them. So that's all of our archetypes. We covered all 10 of them. So moving forward, I kind of just put in some cycles of cards, things that you should be aware of. So there's this uncommon cycle of lands. And basically all they do is they can tap for colorless. They can tap for a color, but only to cast a creature, right? And then they all have this ability. And all of the abilities relate to the creatures that are in those colors. So just looking at one of them, the Oak Hollow Village, the green one. You can pay a green, tap it, put a counter on all your frogs, rabbits, raccoons, or squirrels, right? That entered the battlefield this turn. So, definitely not as good as I first read it right there. But you put counters down on your creatures, right? And these are on lands, right? You got to remember, these aren't even tap lands. So you play these lands, you can tap them immediately for mana, and maybe they give you a benefit in the game. These are pretty good uncommon lands, I think. All of them do something that's not unreasonable and can definitely help your game out. So those are the typal land cycles. And there's also this cycle of 10 cards that are 2 different creature types. So rabbit, mouse, bat, bird, rat, otter, bird, frog. They all have 2 of your 10 creature types on them. So really what these do is they glue these archetypes together. They help hold the whole set and work them all. They're all either enablers or they're all payoffs for those color combos. I just wanted to point these out to you, mostly because I think this is awesome design. I think it's perfect. It really helps this set thrive and do what it needs to do. And they're all common, which I think is also important. We're getting less commons per set now. And so what they're doing with the commons is making them more important, making them matter more. And all of these matter in their archetypes. So I think these are going to be awesome. I'm excited to play with these. I don't know, the idea of all of them being together and doing their thing. And, you know, you got your rat and your squirrel sneaking around, and you got your frog and your bird. I don't know how they interact really at all, but it's cool. And then this is your mana fixing. I should have put on a title here. Here's your mana fixing. I'll just go ahead and say it. Mana fixing this set, not very good. Overall, it's just not there. And I think part of the reason is this set is built for newer players, almost. Like, it's pretty clear that the archetypes are very simple. They're very get squirrels, get raccoons, do that thing. And so, and also the art style, and you go on Twitter, all these people are saying, oh, I've never played Magic, but I want to because of this set. And so what they did is they made the archetype simple. Mechanics are a little, actually somewhat complicated. It's kind of interesting that they did that. And then the color fixing is a little less because they're pushing people into these 2 color combos. Now, that's not to say there's no color fixing. You can play 3 colors in this set. I would say you probably need to be in green if you're going to do that, just like most sets. But in looking at our color fixing, the most basic one, top left, 3 tree, root weaver, 2 mana, 1/3, tap to add mana. He's going to be your most basic color fixer. Very important if you're going to be in color fixing. You got this frog here. He has reach. I mean, he's fine. He doesn't really fix for you, but he can search lands. You just can't pick it. You just reveal from the top until you hit one. Your heaped harvest is a food. You can search for a basic land card. These next 2 are both rares, so take that as you like it. You know, you may never see these. You may never even play with these cards. But I just put them here because they are color fixing technically. And then these bottom 3 are artifacts that all fix for colors. I love this patchwork banner. I love this card. 3 mana, choose a creature type. They all get a bonus. It's just beautiful. And then it can tap for colors. So basic color fixing, nothing crazy here. Don't expect to play a lot of 3 color decks. And there's honestly not a whole lot of reason to. I think the bats and the birds can play well together, right? They're all flying, and so you're getting your benefits anyways. And there's a few others, like maybe the Grixis colors, where you have the lizards and the otters. They want to burn your opponent. So there's some synergies that you could try out, and I'm sure people will, and I'm sure people will have success. But I don't think it's something that we're being pushed into. I think it's perfectly safe, and it's sometimes even better to just stay in the 2 color combos. Stay with the creatures, get your synergies, play that way. So that's our color fixing for the set. These are the lands that also color fix, so there's a few others. This 3 tree city card is probably going to be like $1 million. So, you know, if you see it in a draft and you're at the table, take that bad boy. So, you know, pretty standard color fixing here. Or a tap land that adds a mana of a color, an untapped land that filters for a color, and these 2 rares. Once again, these are rares. So 4 of the, 12? 4 of the 12 are rares. So who knows if you ever get those. That means 8 cards color fix, and some of these are just that, color fixing. Like this 3-tree mascot, you don't want to be playing this card. It is a shapeshifter. It's a changeling, which is kind of cute. But you don't want it in your deck. So anyways, that's our color fixing. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to it in this set, but I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. And here we go. This is my rankings of the colors as I see it right now. Once again, my opinion is very much biased by, first of all, how good or how cool I think it is. If it's not cool, it's, gonna be worse off. But also, I haven't played with any of these cards yet. And so these rankings are very liquid. These are just my first instincts. So at the top, you got the mice. I'm pretty set on this one. I think the mice are the best. And I think people would agree with that in general. The mice have awesome aggression. They have such a good curve. There's so many good 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops that bring you into the game gradually so that you can get your synergies and triggers going. And then, by turn 4, turn 5, you could be killing your opponent straight up. They just have that ability with all the target your creatures to give bonuses and benefits. I think the mice definitely have the best uncommons, and that's super important to have a good deck. So mice are number 1. I don't even know if that's going to change as the set goes on. I really don't. Number 2, I put the lizards, and this one might come as a surprise. I just think the lizards, like burning and going aggro, are a great combo, and I think the lizards do it well. So I think they're going to play well. I think if they can get on the battlefield, they have good 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops like the mice. And instead of the buffing your creatures kind of stuff, they attack and they deal that extra damage from the creatures themselves. I think that the lizards have a good potential. Number 3, I put Go Wide. Go Wide is always pretty good and limited. I think the rabbits do it well. And then they buff all their tokens. They can just, tap at everything, turn everything sideways and win the game. They turn everything sideways and they win the game. Number 4, I got the otters. And I think the otters and the lizards are somewhat similar. But I think the otters rely more on rate creatures. They rely more on those, those basic creatures that set you up and then pay you off, right? So you're playing these burn spells. You're targeting your opponent. There's one otter that deals 2 every time you play a non-creature spell. I think that's going to be very important. I wish I would have put that in. But it's going to be very important. I think that's going to help them win. Number 5, and this was a last-minute switch. I had birds really high up starting out, and I moved them down. And I moved them below the bats because I think the bats are just the birds with a lot more vigilance and a lot bigger butts, and they have this life gain, life loss stuff going on. So I just think they do more than the birds. And I think the bats can play with a lot of the birds cards, but the birds don't really play with a lot of the bats cards. So I think the bats are going to be better than the birds. And I don't know. I'm excited to see where they go. I think draining your opponent with life and gaining life is really good and limited, especially if the archetype does it right. And I think this archetype can do it right. So that's where they're at number 5. And then number 6 is Azorius, the birds. I kind of already talked about it. I just think they just have flying. That's really all they do. And now I would put both of these a lot higher, but there's a problem in the set. And that is that there's more reach in this set than we've seen in the previous 5 sets. I looked at the stats. Last set had OTJ had 11 reach. Ixalan had 9 reach. Wilds of Eldraine had 6 reach. Murders had 9 reach or something. I can't remember exactly. This set has 15 reach creatures. And a lot of those are at common and uncommon, whereas some of those other ones in the previous sets were at rare. This just set is built to block these flyers, whereas previous sets, you had incidental flyers that could ping in for a damage or 2 every turn, and you couldn't block it. This set, they can be blocked. So I think the flyers are going to suffer a little bit, and I think the bats are going to gain from that suffering because they have the bigger butts, right? The bigger butts are going to help them win. At number 7, I have the frogs. This one is very liquid. I think the frogs could be really cool if they can grind the game out a little bit, if they can get the benefit from their bounce. It has great payoff, but who knows if they can enable it. That's why I put them down here. Number 8, I put the raccoons. I don't think there's like a whole lot for the raccoons. I think they have bigger creatures, and that's about it. So if they can play all the bigger creatures and just be bigger than you, they can probably win. But other than that, they just don't do much. I say they get ran under, right? So people say you get ran over. I think the raccoons are going to get ran under with the mice and the lizards and the rabbits. Number 9, I got the squirrels. I don't think there's enough food. So forage is going to take too long to set up, and you're not going to be able to pay it off because you won't have any food. I just think that's how it's going to work. And then dead last, the rats. I think the rats are terrible. There is no threshold in this set. There's no way to support this. There's a few cards. They're not even that good. I think the rats are 10. Who knows? In a month, I could have egg on my face. The rats could absolutely wipe the scene, but I don't think it's going to happen. So those are my rankings. Once again, very liquid. These are going to change, and hopefully with more videos, I'll be kind of updating these and going through why they're updating as we play and learn more about the set. So for the last kind of section, I just wanted, this is more for reference than anything. I put all the combat tricks, the instants, and the removal spells for each color. And so this is for, when you're drafting. This is for when you're playing your sealed pool. Maybe you just have this out on your phone, and you could quickly reference all the instants and sorceries and tricks that could come about. So white has a ton of combat tricks. I mean, white can do so much. Now, some of these are rares, but they just have a lot of access to buffing my creatures, doing this thing. That's because you're in this mouse archetype. But they have a lot they can do. Removal spells, also a good amount. There's actually, I feel like, a lot of removal in this set. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to go look at the stats here, but there's a lot of good removal. White has pretty standard removal. There's nothing crazy here. They have one board wipe, destroy all the creatures, and you can return a creature from the graveyard. That's crazy. I think that's pretty cool though. So 7 removal spells. 2 of those are rares. So 5 basic ones. Banishing Light is your O-ring for the set. I'm really glad there's only 1 O-ring. I was kind of tired of there being 7 of them in Outlaws. So for blue, our combat tricks and instants, there's a lot of them, just like blue always does. And a lot of these are bounce spells or counter spells. There's actually, 3 counter spells in this set? One of them is 4 mana, so whatever. But Shore Up is here. I think Shore Up is a star. 1 mana, give hexproof. It's just awesome. Plume Creed Escort, I want to also bring some attention to. Flash Flying 2/1. When it enters, something gets hexproof. So I think giving your creatures hexproof and just blowing out your opponent's removal spells is always really good. So pay special attention to those. Also, Sugarcoat, a flash aura for 3 mana that turns your opponent's stuff into food is great. We haven't seen something like that in blue, that powerful effect in a bit. Obviously, it's still an enchantment, still can be removed, but really good. And then this isn't special. It's just an extra combat trick, and I ran out of space. It's a rare. It's a really cool one, but just a rare. Removal spells for blue. At least half of these are just bounce spells. Blue does not have good, hard removal. Blue is not really known for that anyways. But I just put all these in here because, they can lose you a game. Calamitous Tide. If they pay 6 mana, return 2 of your creatures, you could just die right there. So take that for what you think about it. So for black, combat tricks and instants. A lot of these are just removal spells that are also instant speed. There's always this creature that's a downwind ambusher. It's a flash creature that if a creature your opponent controls has been dealt damage, then it can kill it. But this one also has the added benefit of giving a creature -1/-1. I think this creature is better than a lot of those. So it's just interesting to see, basic stuff here. Removal spells, pretty much exactly the same. They're all the same. No, there's one different, but yeah, that's just funny. Removal spells are pretty simple. Fell is a new murder, 2 mana, destroy target creature. Haven't seen it before. It's a sorcery though, so kind of a severe downside there. But I think in limited, it's still awesome. I would play that in any black deck. I'd probably play 3 or 4 of them honestly. I think Fell's dope. Red combat tricks, there's a lot of them. They're all pretty good. They all honestly give a little buff to your creatures. A lot of them do. So good stuff there. Removal spells, red, typical ones, nothing crazy. Playful Shove seems terrible. That just seems bad. I don't know why I would play that card. Maybe I'm missing something there, but I guess I can kill the offspring, which is a terrible decision. This card specifically targets children. I don't know. Doesn't seem the best design. Anyways, combat tricks and instants for green. The way we see combat tricks and instants different. Green doesn't do a lot of removal, at instant speed, but they do a lot of this. Buff up your creatures. Once again, Polywallop, the star of the show. I love that card. I think it's awesome. Don't sleep on Galewind Moose, though. 6 mana, 6/6 with Flash is crazy. And then it also has Vigilance and Trample and Reach. That creature is going to straight up lose people games instantly. They attack with their flyers. You slam down your 6/6, block their biggest one, and then next turn you're attacking with the 6/6 Trampler. Galewind Moose is crazy. Removal spells for green. A lot of these are fight spells and bite spells, and a lot of them target only enchantments and artifacts. Pretty standard for green. So last thing I wanted to do is just leave some links, and I'm going to post this in the description of the YouTube video, so you can click on all these links. These are the people I go to learn limited. So Nikolai Bolas, he always does good reviews. He's a really good player. He does videos very similar to this. And then you have Jim Davis, who does a set review. I think Jim Davis is the most entertaining of them. So if you really want some entertainment, go watch his stuff and then watch him play in Bronze to Mythic. Nizahone is a great, I think, baseline set review. Usually the first one I watch, because he just gives it's really my one to just learn the cards. And I like what he says about the cards. And then you have Saffron Olive, who does the MTG Goldfish card previews. So he's already got all his videos up. He doesn't do stuff for limited, but he talks about cards in other formats a lot. So I know people want that kind of stuff. And there's others. There's Paul Cheon. I really like Paul Cheon. I think he's the best content creator who drafts for people. But he doesn't have his videos up yet, so I didn't link them. I'll add the links in as they come out, though. So thank you guys for watching. I hope that people see this video. I hope people learn from this video, can really apply it and improve their game. This has been Limited Insight. My name is Hunter, aka the Humble Checkmate. Please, I'm going to post all this stuff for free. This whole slideshow, you're going to be able to download it or use it on your phone at the pre-release or during a draft. Just leave a like, tell people about the channel. But anyways, that's been everything here. So hope you have a great day.